Really, Emily? Really? We good? Hey guys, how's everybody afternoon? Who's still ready for their afternoon nap after eating those tacos? Okay, good. Well, I'm going to give a talk for how to hack Internet of Things, or also known as device pen testing, using an Amazon AWS example. Who am I? I'm a geek. I have fur babies. I break stuff. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I was told no memes during the presentation because of copyright and blah, 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 so I improvised. So big secret when it comes to IoT devices is no secret. So Internet of Things, what is it? It's actually a computer. Realistically, when you break it down, most of them have a really small ARMS processor. They have a little bit of memory, RAM, and they do things repetitively. They're designed to help your daily life better in one way, fashion, form, or another. I don't know. Sneakers that talk to the internet, I'm still trying to figure out what that's good for. But anyways, so let's talk about the vulnerabilities and things that we commonly see here. So first of all, most of them have a website interaction of some sort to be able to set up the device and get it to work. So that means OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. Yes, vulns everywhere. The reason why is because most of these IoT devices are being put together by small startup companies, and they're just trying to manufacture and get into the consumer. So become the top. Think about your design phase. Log into a you see a UPS, APC, almost every time, gets you right in. Guess what? Most of the time when you're getting into these devices, you have the option of updating the firmware. So that makes it even funner. Make your own payload. You can update it yourself. Most of them don't even check to see if there's a signature for them. So other things. OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. Of course, those are going to be the management websites. Other security protocols that we're looking at is when they like to try to roll their own encryption. Yeah. Let's talk about rolling your own encryption. Just don't do it. Okay. Either that, or to even make things worse, is that they don't even encrypt information. They just like to send it over plain text. There's a lot of devices out there that call back to the internet over HTTP. They don't even go over HTTPS, so they're sending everything in clear text across the internet for you. So other things when we start looking and getting a little bit deeper inside of these things is a lot of them are going to have JTAG interfaces exposed on the hardware side. We'll get into that a little bit more here down the line. So security approach. Why should we do it? Well, because your end consumer is eventually going to care when all their data is exposed on the internet because you get breached. And or if you're the end consumer, you want to know what's happening with your data when you're using the device. So what could you do? Well, if you're a company and you're looking at designing an IoT thing and or another device out there, you can look at targeted approaches. You know, hey, let's just look at the website today. Or, hey, what happens if I throw this thing in a trash can? What can an attacker do from it there? What are the goals? What are you trying to get to? What are you trying to prove is secure or insecure? These are questions that you commonly got to ask. And then the next thing that you got to start looking at is bandwidth. Do I have somebody with inside my company or my organization that has the skills, the talents, and the know-hows to do this stuff? So, and then even if they do they have the time? Because most of the time, honestly, we're running around inside of companies with multiple hats when you're trying to do a small startup business. So most of them don't got it. Third-party reviews. So even if you have the people inside your organization that can do it, if you're staring at the same device over and over and time again, it starts to become your little pet project and your baby, and you get really attached to it. You need a new set of eyes to take a look at it and step back. Sometimes also, management won't respond to the security issues unless a third party tells them to. So, how do we do this device pen testing stuff? Research. Lots and lots of research. Documentation, let's start there. What does this device do? How does it work? Where does it go? What APIs and protocols are it using? How do you connect to it? How do you get it to do something? You know, what does the target actually do? These are the questions as an attacker and or an end consumer you want to look at doing. So just like when you're building it and you're setting milestones of how to build a program, just like an attacker trying to approach it is what's running so I can break it. Those are the type of things that you want to start to look at. What services is it running? What processors? What chips? What test points does it have? Where can you input data into it? Where can you get data out of it? So I want to hack things. Let's look at the logical side. So most of the things when we're looking at the logical side is what services can I connect to over the network, over Bluetooth, over the wireless, over the low band radio system that it has in there. So most of the time these are going to be websites. It's either going to be HTTP or HTTPS. Sometimes both, sometimes just one of them. Okay, so you're looking at the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities there. Next thing that you're going to probably be looking at is a telnet or an SSH terminal. So when you're looking at telnet, a lot of times it could be just a basic text protocol that they're using, and it's not even a real true telnet service that you're going up against. So at that point, you need to look to see if it's self-rolled and start actually working at it, injecting commands into it, see how the program responds. SNMP, same thing there. Is it something that they rolled on their own, or are they actually following the RFC for that, etc.? These are really common services that you see on the logical side of the pen testing for devices that are out there. So there's nothing really new as far as the logical side of the house goes, because it's just a computer when you're looking at it from this approach. So you use most of the tool sets from the attacker standpoint that's already available out there, and then you start looking at it and breaking it down from there of what vulnerabilities are normally associated with these protocols and how you can leverage them to gain information or break additional things. So most of all, out of all this right here, the biggest thing is pretty much all of those in there, except maybe Telnet, require a login of some type, generally most of the time. Default creds, Google will usually tell you in about 10 seconds. Okay, so hardware hacking side of the house. So you pull the device out of the trash can or something, or your friend gets a hold of it and you're curious to see what they can get their hands on from the hardware side. At this point, you're going to look like at JTAG interfaces. So this is you hardwiring onto the processor itself, trying to pull the CPU's memory or the flash bank off the device itself, or looking at the RAM. Other test points and other vectors. So test points, a lot of times there's going to be other test points there, so you can see if there's a positive 5 volts, negative 5 volts from the engineering guys to see if information's traveling along the line where it's supposed to. Other vectors, well, you know, you always got the hammer. You just break it. So let's talk about an example. So Amazon Dash button, AWS IoT button. How many people have seen an Amazon Dash button before or know what it is? Okay, how many of you do not know what an Amazon Dash button is? Okay, I got one person that doesn't know what an Amazon Dash button is. Amazon Dash button is usually a little button from Amazon that you can buy, usually about $10. And when you press the button, it's going to order whatever it's linked to, and it's going to be delivered to your house in 2 to 3 days. So you can set it up to order you a bag of Cheetos every time you press the button. Works out pretty well. So it's a very simple thing and is a very repetitive task type of thing. And it is only about yay big. It's very small. So I'm going to look at the, this one is based off of the IoT button, or the Internet of Things button, that interfaces with Amazon's AWS system. So before we get started, I'll look at what's already been done with this particular device out there. Well, there's already been basic memory dumps off of it. There's been lots of high resolution pictures taken of the chipset itself. And there's already been how-to guides of how to reprogram it to make it do what you want to. So there's a lot of bare bone hacking that's already been done, and how to reprogram these chips. And so Adafruit has a really good guide, and then Duke Nukem, the other guy that's on here on the GitHub, has a lot of the basic information itself. So now, before I get a little bit further into here, basically the backstory behind this AWS button hack was my boss walked up to me and said, hey, if this thing was found in the trash can, what could you do to it? And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? He's like, well, I want you to see if you can recover my certificates and my passwords for the wireless off of it. And I said, okay, give me some time. So we started going down the research line. So I decided that, okay, for the information that he's asking for, it's going to be primarily living on the processor and the flash memory of itself. So that's the first place that I'm going to go, is straight to the hardware side. It's already been set up, so I'm not going to have access to the website to get it reprogramming. I'd have to reset the device and I'd lose the information there. So I have to look at a hardware attack. So I start digging into it. First thing I find out is that it has an STM processor, and it's coupled with a wireless VCM module. And then the big thing is that there's JTAG points all over the place. So as you're looking up here, you're going to see these gold test points right here that are highlighted. These are JTAG interfaces. So here in the next couple of slides, you're going to see where I soldered a whole bunch of wires to this board to attempt to get information off of it. Okay, so documentation. So what does this thing do? Well, it sleeps. It sleeps a lot. And it runs off of one AAA battery that's glued onto the back part of this board that you can't see. So when this thing stops working, more than likely the battery died. That's it. Just the battery died. Replace the battery, probably keep on working, but taking the battery out is not too easy. So anyways, this thing sleeps until you press that button. Then it's going to wake up. It's going to connect to your wireless. It requires DHCP. It's going to connect in. It's going to send its push notification up to the Amazon's AWS server. The Amazon AWS server is going to process that based upon the type of push button that you did. And then it's going to, Amazon's AWS service is going to take care of the rest of the dirty business. That's it. That's all this thing does. Very simple. You push a button, it sends one HTTP request up to Amazon. So, and more information. So basically everything that I just iterated, but with some links to more information about the products. So the STM processor is the big thing about this particular thing, along with the Amazon's AWS button of how this thing actually works. So let's hack all the things, drink all the booze. So as I said, trophies. There's a private certificate and a private key associated with each Amazon Dash button. Next thing is your wireless SSID and pre-shared key. So these are the identified sensitive information that this particular device stores on it. Okay, so anything else? Okay, well, let's take it a step further. If I do manage to get my hands on this private certificate and private key, could I mimic the button? And then is there any other information that's disclosed during the process? So let's start hacking it. So first thing is I tore apart my button and I started soldering. I tell you what, those little test points are really small. Make sure you got a fine tip soldering iron and you're using lots of flux when you're soldering on these little boards. It makes your life a lot easier. Okay, so one of the big things I want to point out for this particular attack that I'm getting ready to show you is that with an STM processor, it's a STM link, microelectronics ST-Link. It was a protocol that was designed by STM, and in 2003 it got reverse engineered. And then it basically became open source. So now instead of having to pay $500 to get a ST-Link reader and the software to actually communicate with your processor, you can now buy it off Adafruit for $10 and then go use an open source program to dump the information. It's absolutely fun. The wireless module, going to have to attempt to use Bus Pirate. Okay, so firmware dump. First thing I did is I hooked it up to this fancy little breadboard, and then I hooked it up to a little ST-Link thing that I got off of Amazon. I loaded up a program called OpenOCD, which allows you to interface with processors and other chips that you commonly find on these circuit boards. So there's a lot of information out there that will help guide you through the process on the internet if you Google it, or you can look through the white paper that's associated with this talk, and it'll talk you through the process of how to get that set up and running. But anyways, once you get on there and you're actually successfully connected to your processor, you can dump the flash memory off the processor itself. That'll come down as a bin, so it's pretty much all in hex. So, and there's only one bank of flash memory on this particular device that is so small, so you only have to worry about dumping flash bank 0. Okay, so the wireless module was not nearly as much fun. The little green box that you see in the picture floating above there, that's the Bus Pirate. So even more wires hooked up to this thing. OpenOCD. So there's a fun thing when you're working with OpenOCD. There's a couple of pieces of information that you need. The first is the processor's IRQ, so the interrupt bus. So you could tell the processor, hey, wait, and respond to my command, please. The second thing is that you also need to know what frequency it's talking on, and then you have to have the processor ID so you could tell it to actually interrupt. Unfortunately, through the research and the time that I was unable to gather all the information to set up my own way to talk to the wireless processor. So I was unable to recover the wireless SSID or the pre-shared key for the wireless. But I did give it a good try. So now we're going to start looking through bins. So after you dump the flash off of a processor, what do you do with it? Well, at this point, it's sort of reverse engineering. So for those that have done any like malware forensics or any other deconstructing of binaries, you're going to recognize a few of these steps. This is going to keep pretty high level. I didn't get into too much depth because last time I gave this talk, everybody's eyes glazed over about this point. So we're going to talk about strings. So strings in Linux is a command line that you could run against a binary that'll look through there to find normal ASCII string characters and pull them out and display it. You can set it up to run strings against on how it was compiled, so if it's little Indian, big Indian, and then how many ASCII characters have to be congruent in each block for it to print out for you to actually look at it. So as you play with strings, you'll actually find what the best scenario is. This particular case, when I was running it against the bin that I pulled off the flash for the Amazon dash button, I found that strings saying that if there was 4 or more characters in a set, go ahead and print it out, worked out really well. Next thing is bin walk. Bin walk will go through a bin file and find where there are compressed files inside of that binary and extrapolate them for you and make them a normal file. And then from there you can actually start working with it again. So in this particular case, when between running strings and bin walk, I was able to pull out that private certificate that we were talking about. It was unencrypted, just laying out there in the binary for everybody to see. This is not the public key for that certificate. This was the private certificate itself that you actually sign things with. So that was just laying out there, and that's why one reason why it's a little obfuscated there. Other than that, there was a few other things of information that was saved out there in plain text. One was the host name that connected to it and initially set it up through that website interface, along with the network name that it was connecting to, so the resolver of the name of the network that it was actually connecting to, not the SSID. So there was a little bit of public information or private information disclosure in it when you started digging down into it. So sum things up is that the private certificate was unencrypted, stored in plain text, sitting inside the binary. Next thing is that network name, the host name, and other information, and some other general information was recoverable through strings and bin walk. Okay, the other thing is that you can flash this device with your own firmware all you want to and make it do whatever you want to. So if you could actually write your own C code, pile it in ARM, flash over the processor yourself and say that, hey, when I press this button, I want it to blink 3 times. So you could reprogram this chip to do whatever you wanted it to. So, other big key points that people should take away from these, from the Amazon dash buttons, is that the battery's just glued in. And more than likely, when the device fails, it's going to fail from having a dead battery. So, before you throw it away, make sure you disassociate it from your Amazon account, or someone's going to be ordering you bags and bags of Cheetos. Okay? And it's very easy because the attacker could just pull it out of the trash can. They could patch in their own 3-volt battery, or they could do what I did and just power it directly onto the chipboard with a 3.3-volt relay. Any questions? Yes.
What were some of the challenges you faced while you were doing the whole breakdown?
Challenges that I faced during the whole breakdown was right towards the end, I bricked my chip. Yeah, brick the chip. So when you're doing embedded device pen testing, there's always a high probability that you're going to brick a chip or brick the device. So either static electricity discharge, or you can do what I did and accidentally flash the processor yourself and destroy the whole thing. So it had no program to run, so it was a little hard to recover from that one.
Were you seeing anything related to the Amazon account where you could actually get credentials?
Yeah, so I was unable to mimic the button and do it like that, because when you're talking with Amazon's AWS server, it requires that private certificate and that private key. So basically the way that that it works is that when you're putting together your JSON request to push it up there, it has to be signed by that private key. And you have to have your private certificate as well to be able to talk. Since I didn't recover that private key part, I was unable to mimic the button. Any other questions? Yes? Is there anything else that I could have done to get that private key? There's a possibility if I didn't flash the memory bank there towards the end, I could have started looking into more of the private sector of where the processor had protected memory to see if I could attempt to bypass those protections. Again, that runs risk of bricking the device. Yes?
Aside from ordering mass bags of Cheetos, what other types of threats do you see emerging from these sorts of attacks?
Other threats that you could look at is, so if I'm on your wireless network where you have an Amazon device on it, I could tell every time that you press that button. 2 minutes? Is that what you said? Okay. Okay, guys, I got 2 more minutes. Any other questions? Yes?
How much farther could you take it? Like, say you wanted to use a private certificate, what could you use that for further?
What could I have used that private certificate for? Well, I could have started signing stuff, saying that I was that IoT button. That's about it. But it only works really well if you're talking to the Amazon cloud, and without the private key, it doesn't give me a whole lot. Any other questions? Yes? It was cheap. It was $20. Some of the other devices I want to play with are like $150, $250. You know, they won't buy me an Alex just to break it, unfortunately. Any other questions?